Welcome to the podcast today, where we celebrate innovation for a happy planet. I'm your host, Abigail Carroll. I am really excited to introduce you all to Stephen Fox, a founding partner of Propeller VC, a new early-stage venture fund that invests in and builds ocean climate companies that use science and technology to address the climate crisis. Propeller is the brainchild of Hubspot founder Brian Halligan, and it was designed to be the venture partner for Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, otherwise known as WHOI, one of the foremost ocean research institutes in the world. While the blue economy is still a nascent segment, there are a handful of ocean-focused funds popping up around Europe and the United States. But with over $100 million under management and a strategic partnership with WHOI, Propeller promises to be one of the major players in this industry. A few clarifications before we jump into the podcast. We talk about carbon credits, and I refer to Verra, which is one of the global organizations that oversees the measuring and verification of carbon credits. I also refer to the practice of sinking seaweed. If you remember from our conversation with Brian from Merchonomics, we spoke about the role seaweed can play in carbon credits as it sucks carbon out of the climate. Sinking seaweed is a controversial method of attaining carbon credits. It involves sinking seaweed to the bottom of the ocean, where it's presumed, under the vast ocean pressure, to be stable, and that the carbon it has absorbed will permanently be stored there. The practice is controversial because it's challenging to verify, and the long-term ecological effects of sinking massive amounts of seaweed are still unknown. Welcome to the podcast, Stephen.
Happy to be here.
I'm really excited to speak to you today. You are a partner in a new Boston-based or New England-based fund, maybe I should say, focused on the blue economy. Tell me what you guys are up to.
We're an early stage venture fund focused on the ocean climate space specifically. I think we're actually at $115 million size fund that focuses on early stage investments. And we're doing it with a really important partner for us, the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, who we really built the fund with. And about half of what we do is working with them to look at opportunities to leverage the incredible skills and technology that they've built to accelerate ocean climate solutions. And then the other half of what we do is invest in early stage entrepreneurs that come from all over the world.
So let's dig into this Woods Hole situation for a little bit. That's, I'm sure, very exciting for the researchers. Tell me a little bit more about what they do.
So Woods Hole, I can refer to them by their lovable acronym of WHOI, is the foremost oceanographic research institution in the world. That for 70 odd years, they've been studying how the ocean works, exploring the depths and contours of it, and modeling it so that we have robust science to really think about how it's working, where there are threats to it, and then what we don't know about it, because much of our ocean is like an alien planet. We really don't know much about it. The thing about WHOI that is so unique and wonderful is it's really composed of both hardcore scientists and engineers. And so they're really able to approach their work in the ocean with this deep understanding of a couple of different parts of the science, but also the engineering to build solutions and build tools to fully understand that. Operating the ocean is really hard work. The ocean breaks basically everything, and WHOI's gotten really good at understanding how it works and building things that help us not only understand it, but also utilize the opportunities that the ocean has to feed us, to produce energy, to bring solutions to drawing down some of the issues related to our climate.
Because everything in the end appears to be related to the climate. Our health relates to the climate, the energy relates to our climate. What are some of examples of technologies that you're interested in that are coming out of Woods Hole?
We're early days in our relationship with Woods Hole. We really started in earnest less than 6 months ago. So we're starting this approach to first really understand what Woods Hole excels at that has commercial feasibility. And some of the areas that, and this is a short list, the full institution has about 1,200 folks working there. So it's large enough that there's a lot of areas of specialty. But we have early robotics and autonomy that we're very excited about, that Woods Hole has been working on in the ocean. We have energy applications, both wind and tidal and wave, that we're looking at. deep sea biology in particular, we're really interested in understanding. There's some researchers who I often joke with them, their offices look like something out of Harry Potter because they just have things in jars all over the place. And then we're also really excited in particular, and I think this is part of the vision of Woods Hole's president, Peter Domenical, who's helped build Propeller. We're excited about carbon capture, both natural carbon capture and engineered solutions. And Woods Hole is not only investigating all those different types of solutions, but also is right now, I would say, one of the leading research centers for understanding the implications of what happens when we put more greenhouse gases in our oceans.
I definitely want to get back to the carbon capture subject because it's coming up a lot in the interviews and it's certainly a big subject. I'm really also interested, since we're still on the subject of Woods Hole, a lot of people discuss the challenges of getting technology to market. It's a particular challenge because research is happening in its own sort of specific world with its own questions and its own curiosity. And then you've got to bring it to a market. And that's its own set of problems where it really has to have a practical solution that has an economy behind it. I'm sure you're facing that. You're looking at those issues now. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I totally agree. Commercialization from research and academia is hard work. It's not often the primary reason for the research, especially when you look at basic research, which is something that there's a lot of at Woods Hole. The way that we approach thinking about paths to market, as you said, for novel research is we have a blended instrument for the way that we approach Woods Hole, which is to say that we have a grant program that's putting grants into labs and working with PIs and engineers who we think are already looking at areas that have potential commercial value.
Yeah.
And we actually, by nature of our relationship with Woods Hole really is the one who's deciding that and looking across our institution to see commercial potential. And it's an incredibly valuable part of our relationship for many reasons, but one of them is that the scientific validity of some of that work stays within Woods Hole before interacting with the commercial space. So we have kind of a grant program on one side, and then on the other side of our work is spinning up commercial explorations. And we try to do these side by side. We try to work with principal investigators and engineers exploring this kind of what I would call like a capability trunk to solve a problem. And then on the other side, we bring in teams, often led by folks that we call an entrepreneur in residence, who are exploring opportunities, white space, what markets look like around these thematic areas. And so as this capability trunk on one side is growing with the ability to address solving fundamental problems in one of these application spaces, on the other side, there's an investigation into where's the commercial potential. And what we look for is the points where we can merge those two pieces of work together, which is to say the commercial side identifies big market opportunities that are either not addressed adequately right now, can be improved upon, or just total white space. And then on the other side, we're saying, we're looking really concretely at building this tool to solve this problem or expanding this methodology that we think is going to be really applicable. And we merge them together and then hopefully spin them out. And again, we're in the early days of that, but we're expecting this quarter, Q1 of 2023, to spin out our first couple of opportunities to address this.
Wow, amazing. These must be super early stage, though.
Very.
So how patient is the capital at Propeller?
Yeah, it's a great question. We're a 12-year fund, so we're tending to look at projects and early companies that can have up to a 7 to 10-year time horizon for returns. So relatively patient in the climate space. Another part of the benefit of working with this blended instrument is that in early stage companies in the venture space, we often think about science risk and engineering risk. And engineering risk tends to be the one that gets underwritten a lot more by early stage investors because it's there's a pathway to solve it a lot more. Whereas science risk, there's a lot of unknowns. The beauty of this blended instrument is that we can take on both science and engineering risk. And we think we have a pathway to do it. And then the other part to this is, like any partnership, building true dialogue and common parlance really is what unlocks a shared understanding of what the pathway to market looks like. And we're putting a lot of programming in and learning a lot from our friends at Woods Hole to unpack that.
Yeah, I mean, is there a way that you can kind of coach some of these scientists so when they start looking at a problem, they look to do their research, they can actually kind of have the exposure to startups and to entrepreneurship that could actually shape the way they actually think about how to address their research?
You're catching me at the right time. We're 2 weeks off of running our what we call our Ocean MBA at Woods Hole.
Nice.
So this was like a multi-day boot camp that was just taught by some of the Propeller folks, taught by content experts in the space, folks that have made the transition from science into commercialization, folks who have been on the government side and leveraged that expertise, expert sales folks. We put together this boot camp to say, hey, like, here are some of the things that you're going to need to consider. And then also, if you're going to want to build strength, build muscles in these entrepreneurial areas, these are some of the first considerations that you might have. We filled the room not only with incredible folks from Woods Hole, but also friends of Propeller that we think will be instrumental to the future of these companies and these endeavors. That was a massive success. We had a slew of really patient Woods Hole folks who went through the first one with us, but we're planning to run not only those every year, we run one at MIT every year, which we've done for our in-market entrepreneurs, but we ran this one at Woods Hole, and then we're planning to start running a series of hackathons around specific subject areas. So actually our first one will be on ocean CDR in 2 months, I think.
Ocean what?
Ocean carbon dioxide removal. So looking at, some of those engineered methods to pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere.
So let's go there. We're hearing a lot about carbon, these carbon credit programs. There's like the interesting news from Oceanomics that they were the first approved carbon credit program for wild seaweed restoration in Japan.
Incredible.
Japan just came up with their own carbon credit program. And I believe they're the first to do that for wild and farm seaweed. On the other hand, we've got a lot of pushback, a lot of criticism, Vera, on the land-based programs. People are looking at what got approved, what got verified, and there's a lot of concern that this is just more greenwashing. So is there a future for a blue carbon credit program? And what does that look like? And how can we not have the same pitfalls that carbon credits in general have had till now?
Great question. The reality is, in almost any climate scenario, we need to be drawing today greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere to avoid really catastrophic damage to our planet. The ocean already does most of the hard work, both on an annualized basis where it's drawing down about 50% of the carbon through the biological pump and the geologic pump that pulls carbon down deep into the bottom of the ocean and stores it in the long-term sediment. But it's also doing it without us engineering it one bit. Whereas a lot of these terrestrial programs are, even, I would argue, some of the nature-based programs are engineered to a degree, which is to say that we really could utilize the ocean to store a lot more. At least that's the thesis behind this, right? And a big part of the Woods Hole relationship is to make sure that we're not doing irreparable damage to our oceans as a result of drawing down the CO2. Yeah. At Propeller, we really believe that ocean carbon dioxide removal is one of the most important pieces that we can play in, and ocean carbon generally is one of our 3 core themes that we focus on. So the way that we're approaching it is we think we need to get going on this right now, and we think that there's going to be robust prices for the future of pulling these down. Who bears those costs? There's a couple of different pathways for, but we think it's, from a first principle standpoint, a super necessary part of our climate economy. We also think that there are really responsible ways that we can capture carbon in the ocean, and that on some of the core principles of how carbon markets are set up, they outpace terrestrial options in a few different fronts. The first is long-term storage. I dare anybody to tell me that they can plant a tree and they can tell me for certain it's going to last 100 years. There are too many variables. I can tell you, if you bury something at the bottom of the ocean, or if you go to the bottom of the ocean, there's conditions down there that haven't changed for millennia, if not many millennia. And that's both by nature of the fact that it's thousands and thousands of tons of pressure that the ocean is putting things under, but it's also, there are parts of the ocean that are stable and there are parts of the ocean that are unstable, and understanding what that is key. So as we think about investment in this space, we're both thinking about what are the capabilities at Woods Hole right now, in particular, to look at how we understand what the effects of some of these methodologies for capturing carbon are on localized and broader ecosystems. And so that gets into this measuring, reporting, verification piece that is an attractive part of the carbon dioxide removal story right now. It's also, what are the best methodologies to create picks and shovel products to give to folks to really leverage this? The last part is nature-based solutions, which I've spent a lot of time looking at. This is when folks refer to blue carbon. These are mangrove ecosystems. This is seagrass, wetlands, and seaweed, macroalgae generally. And these are really interesting ecosystems because they have co-benefits in addition to sequestering carbon. And there's already really active efforts to take full advantage of these blue carbon ecosystems. And we're interested across the board. We're actively making investments in this space.
So who's going to do the measuring? Because it's my understanding that Verra and these big measuring and verification agencies aren't really doing blue carbon stuff yet. Is that an opportunity there for somebody to come in and measure and verify? Is that a startup potential?
Yeah, very much so. The first set of methodologies for blue carbon have been coming online. I give enormous credit to the wonderful folks at Conservation International who brought the Cispada project in Colombia online recently. They're really great work in the mangrove space in particular. And some of my early educators on blue carbon, I remember when Emily Pigeon, who should be called out as the godmother of mangroves, really started speaking about this work. So there's a couple of these nature-based methodologies that are coming online. And then there's a number of different scientific groups that are really trying to validate the other engineered pathways. The National Academy of Sciences is looking at this. And I think that scientific validity and these MRV, measurement, reporting, verification pathways, will unlock the ability to do more of these projects. It makes sense to be very cautious right now. We don't want to do irreparable harm to our oceans by just charging straight forward into these. But there are also, even amongst the scientific community, amongst the commercial community, there are folks who understand the urgency of getting these projects underway, and many entrepreneurs that we have either invested in or have great respect for. We're starting this off.
What about the sinking seaweed? I mean, it seems to be so controversial right now. Is that something that you think is a good opportunity? Are we overcautious with it now? Is there too much backlash, or is this a real opportunity?
It's a real opportunity from a first principles standpoint. I would caution only that I don't think the verification is robust enough on it yet. And it also depends how you do it. Right? There are incredible folks who are growing seaweed that can eat up carbon dioxide all day long and then utilize it for a purpose where we kind of know the full value chain of how it's getting used. The question is, like, if you just drop it somewhere, do you really know? And do you know on what time scale too? That's the other part, is there's understandable caution from a lot of folks, is it's also nascent, that we don't really have a time scale for what happens.
I think that's one of the big challenges in this whole industry, right? I mean, we have all this pressure to move quickly, but it's all nascent. So we're going to make some mistakes. It's just the nature of the beast.
One of my favorite parts about working in this space, and I've been a investor and grant maker in oceans for 15 years, is there really aren't a ton of ocean climate veterans. So the beauty of it is that you're able to bring in folks from other areas, and we need to bring in talent from across all ecosystems to address this, and then rely on the folks who have been experts in the oceans for a long time to kind of school us on how the ocean works, which is why we really started with our Woods Hole partnership. And then the folks who will be the early adopters of commercial approaches, we think are A, going to do terrific things for the climate, but B, we think they're going to make a boatload of money, which is why we started a VC firm.
Right. You know, we talk about blue tech, but what is blue tech, right? It's just like ocean themed, but all the other verticals. It's software, it's energy, and it just happens to be in the ocean, which is its own set of problems and opportunities.
Very much so.
That's really interesting. So you mentioned earlier that you were devices as a theme. And in my time as a angel investor in this space, I've seen a lot of devices, and I find it really hard to make sense of them. What are the opportunities in the device category that you think are really interesting? and have the most potential?
I usually identify 4 components for devices that really like to focus on. One is disruption on cost. These things cost so much friggin' money. And so if you're able to produce things and hopefully manufacture them at scale that are low cost, that's enormous. Yeah. Second is energy and energy source. If you have to stick a lithium battery on this thing and go down, what does that look like? Also, energy also relates to how long things can go out in the ocean. So what's your energy source and how does that let your device operate for longer and more stably? The third is communication. There are really incredible changes in the last 30 years in the ability to communicate on the open ocean, but communicating from the depths of the ocean in real time data to inform decision making, to bring back core information. That's a massive part of it. The fourth one is making things user friendly. We often laugh at devices from incredibly brilliant folks where a good test is if you can teach it to me and I can learn how to operate it, then I think it's user friendly because I have trouble putting up a painting in my house. There's the cost of the device, and then there's the expertise to operate the device. And you'll know, Abigail, better than I, the proliferation of oyster farmers across the Northeast, and a lot of the folks who just don't know how to operate the gear, don't understand what goes into it, need to educate themselves from step one compared to some of the incredible veterans in the space. And I think about devices in the ocean the exact same way. It needs to become user-friendly so that the same way as we've got more people wanting to become oyster farmers, it'll be awesome to see more people who can understand how to utilize this stuff and really leverage the power of the ocean.
We need a Devices for Dummies book.
Yeah, it's the first step.
After a short break, Stephen has some great advice for startups pitching themselves in the blue economy space today. A big thanks to the Maine Technology Institute, MTI, investing in innovation for a prosperous Maine. MTI is Maine's unique public-private partnership whose core mission is to diversify and grow Maine's economy by accelerating innovation in the state's targeted technology sectors. MTI offers grants, loans, equity investments, and services to support Maine entrepreneurs and organizations as they transform their innovative ideas into new products, services, and companies, leading to the creation of quality jobs for Maine people. For more information about MTI and its programs, please visit mainetechnology.org. For a blue economy to thrive, people need to use more sustainable products. But which products? And will consumers actually adopt them? Innovators like you are hustling to figure this out. Spark number 9 can tell you if there's demand for your product. Spark markets your product before it's built using online advertising so you launch smarter. Have a big idea? Vet it with Spark before you build. Visit Spark online at www.sparkno9.com or find them on LinkedIn. Welcome back to Happy Planet. All right, I think there's a lot of startups listening today. What makes a good pitch?
It totally depends. Like, conviction is key. You can't really fake conviction. I think another thing is preparation for questions. I think a lot of people put time into honing their pitch, getting it down to exact minutes, etc. But like, spend as much time thinking about the questions that you're going to get. That part also makes you a better entrepreneur, in my opinion, if you're ready for questions. And then one thing that I personally love in a pitch itself, really tactically, is laying out the challenges that you're going to run into. And I don't care if you roadmap them to overcome them, that's great. If you have a roadmap to overcome them, fantastic. Or you can also admit that you don't know how you're going to overcome them. Any pitch, I'm going to look for what the holes are in the pitch. But if you are able to put them out on the board and say, these are holes, we haven't solved this yet, this is how we think we're going to do it, or we're not sure, we probably need to bring someone on, or this is a challenge that is not instrumental to our bottom line, but we're going to have to address it one way or another. That humility is really great. And also just realistic. Like, I was an entrepreneur not that long ago, and I would sit around just thinking about those problems all the time. So my instinct usually is that other folks are thinking about those problems, and it's okay to share them.
And are there any sort of key elements that you're looking for in a company before you make an investment?
What does leadership look like for the company is probably key. A good entrepreneur is worth 100 times a good idea, if not 1,000 times. What is differentiating about what you're working on? And crucially, how clued in is leadership to putting that into a more macro sense? It's really easy to get caught up in the micro of your small market, but like what differentiates you? And then how does that position you more broadly in a larger market? And the most important thing is traction. If you got traction, if you're selling stuff, if you are even just like talking to customers, if you can demonstrate how much you're talking to customers and understanding what is really important to them, those are probably the first three things I would start with.
What's your deal size? What sort of scale are we talking about here?
Yeah, we're writing checks that usually start at around $500,000 and are going up to, in these early pre-seed seed, going up to $1.5 million. We write larger checks later.
Yeah, you're looking for projects where there's a future add-on. You're going to invest in the seed and then you're going to do a Series A, or how far down that line do you go?
Yeah, we want to grow with companies. We have set aside capital to grow with companies. So certainly through Series A. We also want to be cognizant of where the incentives are. If you're with somebody from the very beginning to the very end, it depends on the type of company, whether that's the right fit. There's also, for instance, in the energy space, I speak to a lot of folks in the project finance communities a lot because I think it's silly to think of VCs as the pathway there. Project finance should come in to de-risk that at some point.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So I've spoken to some people with some really big projects. They need $50 million to lift these things. You're a big fund in this space. Most funds in this space are smaller than the need they have. What do companies like that do?
Demonstrate progress towards $50 million. I think as an early stage company, if you're going to go the VC route, I think there's two ways to think about it, which is, yeah, we are a bigger fund in this ecosystem, and our check size should indicate to you that that's not necessarily a bigger amount for this space, but probably at least in the median, if not on the higher end of the median. It doesn't mean that there's not a lot more capital that you can access. And like I know this from my own entrepreneurial journey, I think there are really smart entrepreneurs who have capital intensive businesses, but can demonstrate traction towards those to build out the progress. And I don't think you're going to get diluted like crazy. If you are a hot deal, if you're working on something where everybody can see the traction, people are going to want to get involved. The other pathway, I think, is there's more and more, especially in climate, grant opportunities that you can leverage to be blended yourself, right? Or to pursue exclusively non-dilutive. There's more prizes for ocean than ever before. So it's not that there isn't the financing there. I think it's just, you have to be really tactical and understand. And the way to start is to ask folks like Abigail or myself, like, I know I need $50 million. What's a realistic pathway for me to get that? And what would you recommend? And the folks that are close to the capital, I mean, my advice is good about 1/5 of the time, but there's, maybe you'll catch me on that one day that it's useful. And there's a lot of people who give much better advice than I can on where you can find good funders that are the right size and scope for your project.
Yeah. But we need some of these big thinkers. If people hadn't invested in Elon Musk, where would we be today? It sounded so outlandish. And now everywhere I look, there's a Tesla driving by. So tell me a little bit about what happens once you get Propeller in your cap table.
We've made 4 investments to date. We're about to make a 5th. And I would ask the folks that were investing in more than us, but we want to be as involved as you want us to be. We do have a team, we have our partners, we have support folks, both working with the Woods Hole ecosystem and then helping our portfolio companies that are there to support. We also want to use the Woods Hole ecosystem as a partner for you in how you're approaching the work that you're doing, particularly as it comes to validating your science. And a lot of folks will just kind of cruise forward, and there are folks in the blue economy space, so you can definitely point to who have pushed forward and then have to validate their science post. And I think that's a tremendous hurdle. The one thing that I think is very unique is the composition of our team. We have rockstar oceanographer and Dr. Julie Polin. We have my partner, Reese Pacheco, who understands climate from a lot of different dimensions. We have Brian Halligan, who has champion a company from zero to, a decacorn scale. And we have Devdet Yelliker, who's like one of the best venture capitalists in Silicon Valley. So we didn't build the team with just investors. We built it with folks that we think are going to give you different angles and add value in a different way.
So how did the fund come about? It's recent.
It came about through my partner, Brian, and the president of Woods Hole, Peter Domenical. And Brian had a a really tough accident while he was running HubSpot and broke a ton of bones, was in the hospital for some time and decided to reroute his work into climate change. And he happens to have a house right up the road from Woods Hole. And so he met Peter Domenical. Peter has grand ambitions for the future of Woods Hole, but one of those is really contributing to climate. And they really thought about how can you get the winds of capitalism behind this? We had long discussions with Woods Hole to figure out that partnership, and that was kind of the bedrock. And then Debda, Julie, Reese, myself kind of came in together, formed our thesis, and then started fundraising money in April of 2022, kind of raised our $100 million by September of 2022, and then have been going ever since.
Who's investing in this space? Like, where do you go? Is this like family offices or is it funds?
We have a terrific LP base. I think they're the best, but they are coming from family offices, institutions, which has been a really wonderful addition. Other funds and funds of funds. That's primarily where they're made up from.
Is raising money for blue tech versus climate tech a specific challenge?
Yes. Just because the asset class of oceans is less known, we point to ourselves specifically as climate tech, ocean climate tech. And I think that fills an interesting niche. I think there are a ton of great collaborators that we have that identify themselves as blue tech. And we really think that the asset class of ocean climate tech itself has the most upside. We wouldn't have started a fund in the space if we didn't think so. But there was a lot of making sure that we could illustrate why we think this has such upside, but also tell the first principles story of why the ocean contributes so much to climate in the first place is probably one of the most hard parts about our fundraising process. There's one number that I like to point to a lot, though, that I think is indicative of the space, which is I mentioned before that the ocean is doing a lot of the hard work in mitigating climate change right now. I would argue 50% of the work. In 2021, there was about $40 billion that went into early stage climate tech. From an investment standpoint, 400 million of that was oceans. It was nothing. It's a pittance. And whenever I see a solution that is doing 50% of the work and yet only receiving 1% of the financing, I think that's a leverage opportunity.
That's great. You guys are probably going to do pretty well with this. Aside from sort of business, what are you hoping to get from this experience at Propeller?
We do a lot of evangelizing of ocean climate solutions. And I think we're going to make an enormous return here at Propeller for our investors. But I really think another value that we can add is educating folks on the real value of ocean and climate solutions. And it's why ocean climate is what we do. That part of it is climate is a Sisyphusian journey. We're all pushing our tiny little rocks up a mountain. One of the parts of climate that I love is that there's no silver bullets. And so as a result, you have to be in a team on it together. And the only way you can get on a team is to always be recruiting.
We all have to proselytize. So entrepreneurs out there in the market trying to change the world, what advice do you have for them?
Be audacious. There's a lot of, let's call them adjacencies, where you're you're making something a little bit more efficient. Do that. If you find something that you're really good at, do that. But for entrepreneurs that start out, be audacious. There are no silver bullets, but there are plenty of copper ones. So get to work on being audacious. And when you pitch or when you want to work with folks who will finance you, we say we're looking for narwhals, ocean unicorns. There's no such thing as a non-audacious narwhal.
So anybody who's not a startup or not necessarily an investor, just people online to get more information, how can people make a difference? How can they get involved in this blue ocean climate revolution?
Read plenty, listen to incredible podcasts like this, read and get educated would be the first thing. And then for Propeller, talent. We need talented people to come into this space. You don't need to be an entrepreneur. You can go work at a company that's in this space. You can advise a company that's in this space. I said it earlier in the podcast, but there are no veterans of ocean climate, or very few veterans of ocean climate. So it doesn't matter if you're working in software or if you're working in oil and gas. We need folks to transition and start working in this space, advising this space. It's the only way that we're going to grow it from this tiny little spat of an oyster to a full-grown thing in no time.
Cool. Good vocabulary there. You know your ocean.
Yeah. I don't know my oysters as well as you do, Abigail, but I'll try.
A big thank you to Stephen for joining us. I really enjoyed learning more about Propeller's strategy and the sectors they are really excited about. If you have an entrepreneurial skill set and are interested in working with startups, Propeller is actively seeking entrepreneurs in residence, mentors, and advisors for their portfolio companies. Thank you for listening. Please follow Happy Planet wherever you listen, and if you like what we're doing, don't forget to leave us a rating and review. Happy Planet was reported and hosted by me. I am also the executive producer. The talented Dylan Hoyer is our producer and editor. Composer George Brandel Egloff created our theme music. Learn more about my work and get in touch by visiting happyplanetpodcast.com.